Wherever you are, welcome to another of my takes on China. And someone asked a question about Russia's rare earth requirements. I'm sorry, I've forgotten who it was. They are a friend of China, and would they be allowed to buy them under these new regulations? And I thought that's an interesting question. So I went to look at the Ministry of Commerce announcements for guidance, and the best I can come up with is an opinion. Yes, they can buy them in some cases, and no, in others they can't. There's two important things that guide my thinking, and these are: China has said this quite clearly, and I quote, 1. As a responsible major country, China employs export controls on related items according to the law in order to better defend world peace and regional stability and to fulfill non-proliferation and other international obligations. They went on to say, number 2, something equally as important: China's export controls are not bans. Licenses will be granted for eligible applications. Now, those 2 points are important. It means, like all trading nations, Russia will need to apply the same way that any other country applies. The big question to be asked is, what is the end use? My opinion, because Russia wasn't specifically mentioned, is that the general rules would apply. Humanitarian needs will circumvent the approval process for immediate export. Peaceful use in medical or other social needs will never be a problem. They'll be registered and licensed to use. Dual use will need certification and approval. Military use is unlikely unless it benefits peaceful rather than aggressive goals. But what does that mean? In the case of the USA, they can apply, but approval to purchase will not, for any military purposes, be granted. The USA has proven time and time again that it's not interested in defense, but in offense. They've even renamed their Department of Defense to Department of War. Now, they might have assumed that this was just them talking tough, but in China, they've just shot themselves in the foot with this announcement. The Department of War goes against everything the Chinese government is aiming to achieve. It was, in my opinion, a suicidal economic move. In Russia's case, I think, the same situation would apply. If they're purchasing for weapons to be used in Ukraine, an offensive war, they will not be allowed, and vice versa. Ukraine can't buy for weapons used in Russia, but would probably get approval for weapons to be manufactured in defense of its homeland. Now, the same thing applies currently in many aspects of export from China to Russia and Ukraine. Despite Western media allegations, China's not supplying drones for military use to either country, but they will supply drones for industrial or agricultural use, and if they're accepted or modified for military use, that's a matter for the receiving country. And we see many instances of modified drones being used by both sides of this conflict. The bottom line is, drones are not controlled items. They're articles that can be legally shipped. China's shipment of them breaches no laws. Accusations that China is helping Russia are equal to and offset by accusations that China is helping Ukraine. As part of its policy of non-interference, China exports to both countries. What those countries do with those items that are not restricted is up to them. However, rare earth elements are restricted now, and that means if a Russian purchaser is building weapons to be used in defense of Russia, then the application would most likely be approved. If the end use is for items that are going to be used offensively, my understanding is that they'd be rejected. Now, of course, everyone's going to say, the problem is the administration of that rule. How do they do it? Each item manufactured using restricted but approved elements would need to be accounted for, and this is why China has created a new department to deal with these applications. Get the elements you need, install them into something that wasn't approved, then you'll have some trouble, but you'll get no more elements at all. I'd be certain that if they applied for them, Israel will almost certainly not get any rare earth elements because they have demonstrated clearly that they are not defensive. And China has demonstrated clearly that it does not approve of Israel's encroachment, expansion, and occupations of Palestinian territory. Hypothetically, If that war were to be over and Israel recognized the two-state solution with its pre-1967 borders as the borders of their own country, they would have a genuine need for defensive purposes. However, we all know that the pre-1967 two-state solution is highly unlikely to happen due to the fact that they are not conducting a defensive war but a war of aggression and attrition against what China wishes and the United Nations recognize as a second state in the region. So that really is hypothetical. That would be my opinion. Although it's possible I'm wrong, the idea of not selling any rare earth elements to any country that wants to produce defensive mechanisms seems both harsh and self-defeating. China does possess these for global use. There's a lot of money involved in processing and exporting them, and there's a lot to be lost by closing down a large section of the market. All China has said it wants to do, as we mentioned earlier, is defend world peace and restore regional stability, which actually seems like a good goal. So the next question everyone is asking is, can the US go to anywhere else and get this? Sure, they can. Australia has plenty, as does Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, and a few other Eurasian countries. Australia is already priming itself as the top source, but they currently have very little or no refining or extraction methods. Rare earth is not rare, but as of April 2025, a report then suggested there are no alternative sources to China available until at least 2030. It looks like refining in any commercial amounts won't happen anywhere in the next 5 years, possibly not even in the next 8 to 10 years. Although, because several named military-industrial contractors were excluding from even applying for these by China back in April, America will go warp speed attempting to bring these online sooner. It's a safe bet that the only way that will happen is by circumventing health, safety, and environmental restrictions. Countries hoping to help the USA need to be mindful of this. People are going to die. Environments are likely to be poisoned, and corruption is eminently possible to overcome valid concerns. Honestly, I don't know if this is the end of the military-industrial complex. I don't know if they can find workarounds to this, but I do know it's a very strong nail in the coffin lid. Let's hope it is the end. Thanks very much for watching again, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.